Dear all, we are on the brink of disaster. The conspiracy has begun, and here we are at its end. Watch the finale to understand all the details.
Right now, the skies over the Middle East are lighting up with interceptions. The geopolitical landscape is fracturing at a speed unseen in decades, and it's all accelerating toward a highly specific deadline, the year 2027. That year isn't random. It marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the current state of Israel. And according to former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, crossing this 80-year threshold is a feat no Jewish state in history has ever pulled off. Sheikh Abdullah Rashdi notes that this analysis avoids claims of prophecy, relying instead on historical cycles found in scriptural tradition. This timeline maps the ancient historical data. The United Monarchy, ruled by David and Solomon, lasted roughly from 1050 to 930 BCE. As a unified, cohesive state, that era lasted barely 80 years before fracturing into the northern and southern kingdoms, which were eventually conquered. Then, fast forward to the Hasmonean dynasty, established around 142 BCE. By the time it succumbed to internal rot and Roman intervention in 63 BCE, it had lasted, once again, about 79 or 80 years. Bringing us to 1948, the current state is rapidly closing the gap on that exact same historical expiration date. And if you look at the geopolitical reality on the ground today, the signs of structural decay are already showing. For years, the idea of directly threatening this occupying entity seemed like sure fiction. Today, the interception rates of their defense system are dropping as the grid is overwhelmed by constant multi-front barrages. At the same time, its political isolation is compounding. Spain has restricted arms cooperation, and France has moved to block its airspace to flights carrying weapons intended for the region. These diplomatic ruptions mirror the internal friction and external isolation that historically precedes the fall of a dynasty. The loss of absolute military invulnerability, combined with a wave of global pushback, means the state's current trajectory intersects with that 80-year deadline. Islamic end times prophecies center on Jerusalem, requiring a close look at the scriptural fate of its current occupiers. There is a widespread assumption among Muslims that the current Zionist state will survive all the way until the Great Battle, or al-Malhama al-Kubra, where it will finally be fought by the Mahdi and Jesus. But the Orthodox texts describe a different reality. The Hadith indicate that when the Great Battle finally begins, the main camp of the Muslim army will already be permanently established and praying right there, stationed between the Levant and Jerusalem. There is no mention of a battle to conquer the city at that specific moment. Logically, for forces to be stationed there as a home base, Jerusalem must already be liberated and flourishing long before the Malhama even breaks out. This flowchart illustrates the sequence mapped out in prophetic tradition. Step 1 is the flourishing and cultivation of a liberated Jerusalem. That event is directly tied to the next node, the subsequent ruin of Yathrib, or Medina. Whether that means physical destruction or a sharp decline in religious visitors, it follows the rise of Jerusalem. The decline of Medina then triggers the outbreak of the Malhama, the massive global conflict. The conclusion of that great war leads directly to the opening, or the conquest, of Constantinople, and immediately following that, the final phase kicks in with the emergence of the Dajjal, the Antichrist, and the physical descent of Jesus, son of Mary. Today's geopolitical conflicts are not the ultimate apocalyptic battle. They are the precursors needed to clear the board and trigger this entire prophetic sequence. In the present conflict, the forces actively exchanging fire with the occupying entity are largely these Shiite military factions. For Orthodox Sunnis, this requires a strict theological framework to categorize these fighters, rather than relying on emotional tribalism. This chart breaks down how classical scholars divide these groups. On one far end, you have the Gulat, or extremists. Because they hold beliefs like elevating figures to divine status or claiming the Quran is altered, consensus places them entirely outside the fold of Islam. But the majority faction we see fighting today, the Twelvers, or Imamis, sit here. The core ruling is that they are Muslims. However, they are classified as innovators because they hold beliefs and practices that contradict the established Sunnah, provided they don't cross into outright disbelief. Understanding the label of an innovating Muslim is critical, as it dictates the legal and doctrinal rules of engagement for the modern Middle East. Here is the first rule. When a Muslim with innovating beliefs is locked in combat with an original disbelieving enemy, like the occupying entity, Orthodox doctrine dictates that you support the Muslim and pray for their victory against